show up. Okay, so we're going to add a list of students to the cohort details. Right? So on this page, we need to look at what data do we have. Right? So this is the page. This is the cohort details because we're on cohorts 1. And to remind ourselves, oh, I'm on the cohorts detail page, and I want to show a list of students. Do I have that data? A couple ways we can look at that. Right? We can look at the network page, and we can reload the page. And somewhere in here, in all these network requests for the blah, 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 we can kind of find where the JSON is. You can also just look at what's called XHR. These are your fetches. And you're like, oh, there's my JSON, right? And you can look through here. Unfortunately, here we can see the list, right? And oh, we don't have any list of the students, right? We want to build a list of the related students. All we have is created, end, ID, name, paid, state, student count, updated, and the URL for where this data is coming from. We want a list of students. So, just like how we added the student count, there's that other, do I have that other? Here it is. Right, just like we added to the cohort, we added a student count. What we want to do, we want to add a list of the students. Right, we want to list all of the students in here as well. So, it looks like when I generated the scaffold for the students, I didn't do that as JBuilder. So let me rebuild the students. These are things you won't have to do. So don't mind this for a moment. So now in our views, we also have students. What I want essentially is I want to generate all of this information for the students. I want to use the students JSON builder, but I want to use it from the cohort. Okay. So again, kind of like how we said, hey, the cohort, we have students. I want to render all of these as an array. And I want to add onto this list of things that I'm building also the cohort students. So now we've got to look a little bit at JBuilder and understand some of its syntax. So if you Google search JBuilder, you'll likely find the GitHub page for it, right? And this will describe how JBuilder works. So if we look at this example here, right, they're building an example to render a message. In this example, they're rendering a message. And one of the things they do is they list all of the comments. Well, this is kind of like what we want to be able to do. For our cohort, I want a list of all of the students. So how did they generate this? They said the comments for this JSON is all of the message comments, and what I want is the content and the created at. So we can do something similar. Here we can say, what I want is JSON students. What's that going to come from? It's going to come from the cohort students. Right. And what I want from this is what? What do we have about a student? We have their name, their address, their age, and their email. Thank you, I was about to do the same thing. So we have their name, their address, their age, and their email. So let's add that here. And then before we jump back and try and use it in the code, let's see if now we get, hey, here's my cohort. Now my students has all the student details. Nice, right? So imagine in your app, if you have a list of all of the troops, you could also have nested inside all of the events. Here's a list of all of my classes with all the poses. Here's all my patterns with all my steps. Here's all my companies with all the jobs. Here's all my videos with whatever is nested inside. Right? So now we have all of the students inside. We should, even if we're only getting one cohort, we should also just have the students. Right? But we also kind of had to repeat. We had to repeat all of these things, the name, the address, and the email. I wonder if we look in the list, right? We were able to do this partial as. I'm curious to see if we could also do it this way. Could we also say JSON students, cohort students, partial is students, student as student. Will this work? Because then we'll avoid having to repeat. No. Undefined method student URL. Students, cohort students, partial student, student as blah. Undefined and student JSON builder line 2. If we leave this out, will this work if we leave this out? Aha, okay. So because this is, gotcha. Because this is nested, what we have to say is cohort student URL, and we have to give it the student's cohort and the student. This is one of those nesting things. Right, because students are nested inside a cohort, we have to say it's the cohort student's URL, and we have to give it the cohort and the student. Which is another one of these things that we've got to clean up because the generator doesn't know. The generator doesn't know about nested. Well, that seems wrong. That seems wrong. What's that funny %2F1 in there? Because it should just be this. Huh. That's weird. That's weird. Where's our list? Cohorts 1, cohorts 1. What happens if we do a 2 in here? Cohorts 1. We're getting cohorts 1, cohorts F1. Huh. That's weird. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Isn't it cohort the student instead of student the cohort earlier on the CBS code? VS code? Isn't it cohort the student?
No, I'm taking the student and I'm getting their cohort. It's the other way. So I know the student and I'm getting their cohort. So I want the cohort student URL.
ID?
Yeah, because what we have is a student. Now if we look at the student, it knows it's cohort. And if I have to give this URL, the other thing we can do is we can just get rid of this because we don't really need the URL here. So if this is giving us trouble, we can just get rid of it. And that makes it easier. And then we don't care because I don't need the URL for the student. So that's an easy way to get past that problem. All right. So we can do either of these, right? Manually or using the existing JSON builder for a student, like so. Cool. So now that we have the students in here, let's go back to our front end. So on our front end, on the detail table, do we have an error here? I saw a red. What's our error? Oh, somewhere on core details, I did class equals. Oh, right here. Good. I always try and keep those red away. because it's better to kind of clean them as you go than to wait for the end. So now what we'd like to do is have another list here for students. So if you all were doing this, maybe you would have had a mock-up that looked like this. Maybe you had something that looks like this, and let's make this active. All right, so maybe you have this list of students that's hard-coded. Let's make this dynamic. So now I have this .state.cohort, but one of the things I now have is .students. Why do I have .students? Because in addition to name, start date, paid, and student count, I also have the students. So now I can say here, students map a student to what? To an LI, like this. Go over here, so I have more space. To an LI, and instead of hard-coded Gavin, it is just the student name. And the key I can put on here is the student ID. So now I'm just taking that hard-coded list of students, and I should get back this .cohort.students. It's saying that cannot read in property map of undefined. It's saying that my students here is undefined. Because there's no students here in my default state. See how my cohort I made blank? Now I need to be a little more crafty. I have to say an empty cohort has no students until I load the students from the database. There we go. And you can almost kind of see the cohort load first and the students come in afterwards. It's kind of hard to see, but the very first time, like the cohort rendered and then the students. So I have to make sure that this default state, if I'm using something nested, is also present and empty, because before the component renders, I have to wait for this Axios call to get back. If I try to loop through these students, right, this .state.cohort, I have to provide an empty list of students, and then when I replace my cohort, I get the students for the cohort replacing it. So let's see what happens now if we come back and go into Proforma. Okay, well there are no students here, and that looks kind of silly, right? 0 students and the students blank. Let's make this a little smarter and say I only want to show this if there are students. Right? So now we could make this a component. The other thing we could do is we could copy this part of the render. Let's copy it, and let's make another function called render students. Let's make that a method, and let's have it return this. Right? So render students just returns that original UL, and then we can replace this here. We can delete this and replace it with this .render students. Right? We've extracted that part of the render into a little helper method. Right? So it's just going to render these students here or render these students here. Now that it's a method, we can use JavaScript to add a little bit of logic here. If this .state.students, this .state.cohort cohort.students length is 0, return nothing. So in the case that there are no students, we don't even get the students section. Right? In the case of Proforma, there are no students in the database yet, so we return nothing in this little render students. These are the little niceties that you can do on your app once you have most of your app working. Like once this most page is done, I'll keep a note like, oh, I should make it so that if there's no students, I don't do this. Or maybe we render a p tag, no students yet. Right? You can decide what you want your user interface to do, right? When there are no pattern, there's no yoga poses. Maybe you show a thing like, click here to start adding yoga poses, or hey, there are no events scheduled for this troop yet, as opposed to just having a blank page. This is sometimes in user interface design called the null state pattern. What do you want to show if there are no students versus when there are students?
Is that null state?
Null state, N-U-L-L, or blank, or the blank state, or the empty state. I'm just gonna have it be empty. Not Axios, please. Okay. The other thing that I want to do to make this a little nicer is before the button, or after the list group, let's add some margin bottom. So Bootstrap comes with some built-in classes for amounts of margin. If you were doing this in CSS without a framework, you would just add some bottom margin in your CSS. Bootstrap kind of comes with that as is. And we can also add some margin bottom here. These are all Bootstrap-y things that don't apply if you're not using Bootstrap. I just didn't like that the delete button was jammed right underneath.
What does the NB stand for?
Margin bottom. Margin bottom.
So it could be MT
for margin top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it has MT, MB, ML, MR. And they have numbers, I think, 1 through 5 for how much margin to apply. It's one of the things that you get with Bootstrap that you'd have to kind of do on your own with CSS. So that's a nice thing about Bootstrap is you can get really far with styling without writing any CSS. And then you can like layer a little bit of CSS on top. If you're interested in learning a little bit more Bootstrap, I do have a Bootstrap assignment that I can share with anybody. We can get some practice using it if it's something that you're interested in, or if something you want to learn like week 14, I'm happy to share those kinds of things with you. Because there are a lot of teams that use Bootstrap as their user interface. It comes out of Twitter. Twitter created their own internal CSS framework and then released it to the public, Twitter Bootstrap. I don't know if they still use it. I think they do, but it's kind of fallen more into the open source community for things. Cool. So that adds a list of students to the cohort details. Let's commit that. And then over here somewhere is this, and then let's commit this. Adds list of students to the cohort JSON. Awesome. What did we want to do next? What did we have on our list? Edit a cohort. Let's see if we can edit a cohort. So from this page, we also want to be able to edit a cohort. So let's go make the edit cohort component first. I think that the edit cohort component and the create cohort, create cohort ended up down here. Oopsies, that should really be up here.
Do you usually delete hello world file or just leave it there?
I would move it to coordinate everything in components. Pretty much all the components you create should be in the components folder.
Oh, what I meant was a hello world. Do you delete
Oh yeah, I would probably delete it. Yeah, at some point I would delete it. So let's look at the page for creating a cohort. Well, this is going to be a lot like editing a cohort, right? So maybe you don't have a create and an edit page. Usually those pages are really similar. So if you don't have both designed, you can just design one or the other, and then we're going to essentially make a copy of that component, and you'll see how we duplicate it. So let's take create cohort, and is there a duplicate? No. Let's copy and then paste it. And then let's rename this to edit cohort. Bless you.
Thank you.
So let's make this edit cohort. Let's make this edit cohort. Cool. So edit is going to be a lot like create, except for we want to know which cohort we're editing first. So in our app, if we add a route for this, let's make it edit ID. This will be edit cohort. So if we go to cohorts edit ID, we want to see the edit. So we go to cohorts edit 1. We don't want this to be a page for a new cohort. We want to load the details for cohort 1 in here and put them in the form. And rather than say create, we want this to be an update. So one of the first things we have to do on edit cohort is component did mount. What do we want to do? We want to fetch this cohort. Axios get. What is the URL for getting the details of a cohort?
Cohort details.
It's going to be cohorts, and then the ID of the cohort.
Right.
This we're going to get from this.props.match.params.id. Right? Because we're getting it now from the router. Edit cohort's going to be able to find out what cohort it is because we're going to pass it this ID. Once we get this response, we need to change state. So we need state to be an empty cohort.
So Axios knows which ID it is, like either student or cohort.
It doesn't. We have to tell it. So we're telling Axios, call the backend route endpoint for getting a single cohort. And we tell it which cohort based on the ID we get from React Router. Right, because /cohorts edit 1 right, just like this, right? So we're getting the ID from here, which in router comes from this.props.match.params ID. When the response comes back from that, let's set state cohort to response data. So now in our form, the default is not going to be blank. What's it going to be? This.state.cohort.name. Right. And if we're pulling in the cohort correctly, we should get the name filled in here, except we have an error. Oh, we still need to do this silly .json. We're going to fix that in a minute. Right? Cool. Look, it filled in the name. And then for the start date, we're going to have something similar. The default is going to be this.state.cohort.startDate. And the end date is going to have a default of this.state.cohort.endDate. And the page is not going to be default true. It's going to be this.state.cohort.paid. Cool. Now, because we're loading on component mount, we're using the API to get the details of this cohort, setting the state cohort, and then we use that cohort data as the default for our form. If I go to cohort edit 2, that's proforma. If I go to cohort edit 1, that's cohort 13. Right? So it's literally almost the same code as create with just a few changes, because with create, our defaults are all blanks. Here, our defaults are whatever's in that cohort. We load it first. Then we have to change the on submit, right? Rather than use post cohorts, let's remind ourselves what our routes are. What's the route for updating a cohort? It's right here. What do we want to use? Patch or put, and we have to give it the cohort and the ID. So we have to change the Axios call here to patch or put. Let's use put. All right, and this is no longer a hard-coded string like this. We have to use an interpolated string and then give it this.props.match.params.id or this.state.cohort ID. Either of those are fine because now we know the ID from either of those. That's totally up to you if you want to use the ID that you got from router or the ID that you got from here. And then this works the same way, right? As soon as we get the response, we want to go back home. So let's change the title for this cohort. Paid is a Boolean. Let's click it and see what happens. Oh, interesting. Are we getting an error? We are. We're getting an error from the server. We're getting a 500 error. Let's go over look at our Rails server. Oh, I forgot the .json thing again. I'm going to show you the code to put in here so that we don't have to keep putting .json on the end of all of these, because that's super annoying. Okay, so let's keep this up. Let's keep this error up and see if we can get this awesome sauce. And submit.
Yeah.
Hey, we changed this. So now all we need is a button here on our cohort details. In addition to a button, let's put a link to, where are we going to? We're going to cohorts edit this.state.cohort.id. What we want to call this, let's call this edit. We have to import link from React Router DOM. Import link from React Router DOM. There's our edit. Let's throw some bootstrap styles on it, so it doesn't look ugly. Button primary. That's weird. I wonder why those are off a little bit. That's kind of weird.
Margin. Oh yeah, the margin.
Oh, it's the margin bottom. Yeah, so I put margin bottom. So what I should probably do now is wrap this in a div and put margin bottom 3 on the div, and move the button in here and remove the margin bottom from here. There we go. And then if I want, I could put some margin right next to the edit button. Hey, and that takes me to edit. Let's see, do we turn this page? Okay, there we go. Awesome sauce, cohort 13. Lucky number 13. Yep. Let's change the start date. Let's put the start date in, like, just so we can see it, in the year 2020. Submit. There we are. Maybe we don't want, when we're done editing, to go back to the home page. What if we want to go back to the details page? Well, we just change what we do here. Rather than pushing slash, we go to cohorts, this.state.cohort. Nope, that's delete. I want to be in edit cohort. Rather than going home here, we want to go to cohorts, and then this.props.match.params.id, and change this to a dynamic string. Right? On the edit page, rather than go home, redirect us to the cohorts detail page. Right? Now when we edit this, we come back to here. Right? So most of the time your edit and your create are going to be super similar. The difference is when you create your edit, before you can populate the form, you have to load the thing you're looking for. And then you change it from a post to a put, and you have to give it the ID. Because that's the difference in our routes between a create, right, is post cohorts, and our update is put cohorts ID. But most of the time, your edit page and your create page are going to be very, very similar, right? At this point, we could do any kind of styling difference we want here, but I think this is probably enough. So that looks like a pretty good. That looks like a pretty good edit page. So we said we wanted to do something with search. So search probably goes back on the main page here. So let's see if we can add a search. So if we bring up our list cohorts, oh, nope, over here. We want to add a search here. Let's go take a look at Bootstrap to see if they have. It's probably just going to be a form, yeah? It's probably just going to be a form. Let's reuse the form thing. Let's just build a form here. So similar to create cohort with this form, let's make a form for searching so that we have like a little form here at the top for search. So our list cohort is also going to have a form. Its title is going to be search. It won't have anything required. And we'll search just for the name. This is all we're going to have in our form. Let's bring the form component over because we're going to need that. And then before we have these, let's have form schema equals form schema. Oops. This might be too much user interface, having search and this. What if I take the title out like this? And let's change this to search. What if I get rid of the title? Will that give me? Nope. No, we can clean that up in a little bit.
Maybe we can put navbar with a search function.
You can do what?
Put on navigation bar.
Yes, it would work very similar in a navigation bar. Maybe I'm not going to use the form because I think what we want for this, let's get rid of the form thing. I think what we want here,
Your form's key.
yeah, I think what we just want is a plain old input. Let's do it as like an interactive search like we did before. Type is search, type is text, placeholder is search, ... Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. So now what we want is a second state in here to be search. What would we call it? Search. I call it search. Right, the search is empty. We don't have anything in the search. So we're going to make a state to keep track of what we're searching for. And down here, the value will be this.state.search. And then we need our old friend onChange equals this dot on search change. And then here we'll make an on search change function that takes an event. And we'll do this dot set state search to the event target value. This is just so that we can keep track of the search, and as we type forma, right, our state is changing. Right, if we look at our React DevTools, where are my React DevTools, and we look for our router, switch, route exact, list cohorts. Here's my search down here. When I type in forma, right, our state is changing. Pro forma. So now what we want is every time this state changes, we want to do something. So that's a second argument to our set state. So every time this changes, we want to do the same search, but we want to tack on a parameter search equals this.state.search. We want to change this from a hard-coded string to a string. Let's get rid of these console logs. We don't need console logs anymore. Right? So now what we should see in our Rails server is every time we typed FORM, we should see search equals F, search equals FO, search equals FOR, search equals FORM. Because every time we are changing state, once that state is changed, this little callback function is happening, and we're doing another Axios get cohorts JSON search equals blah, and then we're going to change the state. But the server isn't doing anything with that yet. So what we need to do in order to make search work is go into the cohorts controller and do a little bit of logic. Let's get that search param from the parameters. Now we're on the back end, right? We want whatever is in this little search param.
Is param, is that referencing the URL and that, so to speak, the slash search?
Yeah, it's everything after the question mark.
Okay, because I was thinking it was taking like parameter what in terms of going back into the object where the, I guess, whatever the model is? And
no, because we're not there yet.
Right.
All we've done so far, remember the first thing the controller does is, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking at that URL and saying, what data can I suck out of that URL? Do I have an ID? No. Oh, but I have this question mark search equals, so I at least have that as my parameters.
Oh, so it's looking for that and then identifying that with the control.
It's anything that's in the routes, like /:ID, that becomes a parameter, but so does any question mark things at the end of the URL.
Okay.
So if the search is present, our cohorts are the cohorts where name is I like something. What is it I like? It is I like search.
So when, say with like
Otherwise.
just like a get request where it's slash and we don't necessarily need ID. We had, like, it was like at animals equals params. Oh, it would be animals. Okay, so that's what
Yeah.
okay.
Because like here we're trying to find the params ID.
Right.
Because some of those URLs have slash
yeah,
ID.
I get it, and I get it.
So now, if that parameter called search is present, we do a slightly different query. Otherwise, we get cohort all. So now what we should be able to do is in here, if I type in F, look at that. If I type in cohort 4, let's put, let's go back. We don't have a way to go back to the home page yet. We probably need to add that, right? So now the word proforma appears twice. So if I type FOR, right, if I type in X, if I type in a 4, right? Because everything I type is making another API call. This is interesting. What if I type in X, I get, if I type in a Y, I get nothing. Here's one of those null states. What should we show if there are no search results? We should probably show something. So that should become like an if statement somewhere in my list cohorts. That's another little nicety that I would put on my list to do on the last day or so, last couple of days after I finished everything else, right? I would note to myself like, oh, in my README, later, if there are no matches for a cohort search, show a message instead of a blank page, right? And then I'll be like, nah, one of the last things I'm gonna do, right? So I keep a list of all the things I need to do, and maybe I just work on them one at a time. Yeah. The other things you're gonna sprinkle in here is like improve the CSS on this page, right? Because maybe your CSS isn't perfect yet. I like having a list of all the implementation things and all the list of the styling things, because I'm gonna work on implementation, I'm gonna get burnt out, right? After like a whole morning of working on implementation, JavaScript and Ruby, I just want a table flip, I'm done. After lunch, I'm gonna work on CSS. And I'm gonna take whatever I implemented that morning and make it look prettier. And then CSS is gonna burn me out after a couple hours, so I'm gonna switch back to working on JavaScript and Ruby. So I tend to flip back and forth.
Yeah.
Some students want to do all at the same time. They want to work on JavaScript, Ruby, and CSS. I'm going to make this whole page perfect. So I'm going to do all of the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript, and the Ruby, and then move on to the next thing. That's up to you, kind of which style you like. I like switching back and forth, because trying to do all of it at the same time, it's enough to try and do JavaScript and Ruby at the same time. To do JavaScript, Ruby, and HTML, CSS, that tends to get to be a bit much.
Maybe we can do with create for search page.
Well, I think even if you were searching like this, you'd still want a create here. Maybe if it doesn't match anything. We could put the create at the top. We could put the create like in a navigation bar instead of being here, right? Because there is a navigation bar, nav bar, right? That looks like this, right? So maybe the search goes up here and a create goes up here in the navigation. Right. That might be a later thing to do. Add a nav bar for navigation and move create and search to the navigation bar. Right? I would have that as a like if I have time, right? Maybe it's later, or call it fancy, right? Fancy mode. Right, you're going to need to start keeping a list of things that you'd like to do, but you may not have time to do. Right, and those are the kind of things that for me might end up being on that list. Let's mark search cohorts as done. So let's commit this. Did I misspell it?
Yeah, it was cohort.
Oh, that's fine. Oh my goodness.
It's just a message, but.
Searching cohorts. Let me show you how to fix that. Oh, but I pushed it. It's too late.
It's too late.
It's okay.
If you haven't pushed it, there is a way to
Undo last commit.
but there's also something called amend. Oh, it's not
that's
in
right.
here.
You can do that in the terminal.
You can do it in the terminal. Oh, it's right here.
Yeah.
Amend.
Yeah.
So, but I already pushed it, so it's too late for me.
Okay.
Boo. I pushed right away. Okay, cool. So we have all of these things. We have our cohort display. Let's create students. Because I think we've got pretty much everything in cohorts, at least the basics there, right? We can search, create, delete, update. Right? Anything else is kind of bonus at this point. Let's be able now. Actually, something's bothering me. Let's make this not centered. I want to make it a link to home, so that from here. Import it there. Ooh, what happened?
Oh, there's no closing bracket on the browser router at the top? Or that's the whole thing? Okay.
Yeah, what happened? You should not use link outside of router. Oh, so I have to move this router up here. So the router has to be the most outside thing
Okay.
if I'm using a link.
Yeah.
So now I can click on this and go home.
Oh, nice.
Right, so now I at least have a way to go home. I was tired of not having a way to get back to the home page when I needed it. Okay, cool. So let's make a way to add a student. So in the cohort details, let's add a what do you all think?
I was just thinking another button with the button success.
Yeah, another way we could do it. So there's a couple ways we could do it. Let's talk about them. I could make another button here that takes me to a separate page where I have a whole form for creating a student. I could also just add the form right here, and as they add the students, the page just updates with a list of students. Which do you think?
The latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do the latter. That seems kind of neat. So like, I'm just gonna add a student to this, and I'll just be able to type in their information, and when I hit submit, the page just reloads the list of students. That's gonna be cool. So that's a lot. So let's add it under the list of students. Let's add another function. Let's call it add students form. And then let's make that function. Add student form is a function, and it's going to return some DOM. And for now, I'm just going to say the form goes here. Right? The form's going to go right there. So this is where I'm going to add the form for a student. So I already did this once. I did it for creating a cohort. Let's take the structure here and turn this into a student. So the student has a name, so that's cool. What else did the student have? I don't remember. Yes, age, email, and a couple other things. Yeah. We don't remember.
Gender.
I don't think we kept that. Name, address, age, email. Just those four. Perfect. Name, address, age, and email. Cool. So there's name. Address is a string. We're lucky. Hey, this is going to be easy. Age is an integer. Oops, and this is going to be address. This is going to be age. Let's take the default out for age. I don't think we need that. And then email is a string. Perfect. This is email. I think that's right. Cool. Then let's render the form whose schema is form schema. And then we have to import form from React JSON form. Perfect. Look, it's right there. The styling is a little bit off, but we can work on that later. Let's call this add student. So now we need an on submit. Let's make a function called add student. It's going to take a form, and it needs to do something very similar to creating a cohort, right? We want to call Axios post, because we're creating. Let's look at our routes. Where is creating a student? Student create, right? It's going to be right in here. So let's take this URL and put it right inside of here. So cohort ID, not the literal cohort ID, but we want to put inside of here which cohort ID we're talking about. This dot state dot yeah, if we
or dot state, it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, or right, this dot props dot match dot params, or this dot state dot cohort ID, because we have it in two places. So we can do this dot props dot match dot params dot ID, because that's coming from router, or this dot state dot cohort ID. Either of those is fine. What do we want to send it? We want to send it a little object with a student form.form data, right? Because now, what are we creating? We're creating a student from what? The form data. Then response. We want to reload the cohort, right? We want to reload this cohort. Well, how do we reload the cohort? That's up here. This is a case where if I'm copying this data or this code to reload the cohort, it probably makes sense to refactor this nicer. But for now, what we can do is get an error because my page went blank. Well, how do I know I got an error? Oh, I'm not running the server. When it says connection request denied, right? Error, connection, network error, it means I'm not running my Rails server. It's a good way to know, like, if all of a sudden your data goes away, chances are you either have a syntax error or you forgot to start your server. Let's add a student. Jason, who lives at 123 Main Street, 21, and is Jason at suncoast.io. Submit. Uh-oh. Did I get an error? Let's look at our console. I did. Ah, I keep forgetting the .json. No, that's add student. Oh, it's the JSON here. So let's add Jason, 123 Main Street. It's 21. His email is jason at suncoast.io, and submit. It said 404 not found. What did this say? Oh, I forgot HTTP localhost 3000. This HTTP localhost 3000 is also going to go away once I show us how to do merging of the React and the Rails application together, which I think we're going to do tomorrow. Cool. So we have to make sure that that's in here for now, and our .json is on here for now, both of which we're going to make go away. And it's cohorts, the ID students. Now, finally, I think we can take JSON 123 Main Street 21 JSON at suncoast.io, and hopefully we'll see JSON appear up there with the rest of the students. And we should also see the number of students go to 3. Oh, not yet. What else is broken? Now we got 422. 422. Student name, email. That all seems good. Student name, JSON address, age, email, cohort ID. It failed. Right? I can tell it failed because there's no commit, there's a rollback.
Yeah.
So the student is this. That. So let's go take a look where it says students controller RB line 20. That seems to be where the error is. Students controller RB line 20. Oh, you know what I lost? When I remade my controller, I lost all that code with the right, because I had to unfortunately regenerate my scaffold because I wanted the JBuilder stuff, so I lost this code. Let me add it back in. Boo! You all won't run into that. You won't run into that because you'll do it right. You'll do the JBuilder stuff from the first point. We had to do it, and we had to do it here. So everywhere we have capital student, cohort, cohort, student, student, student. This should be enough. Redoing what I had done yesterday. Love redoing stuff. So let's clear this and let's submit this again.
Come on, Jason.
Come on, Jason. Nope. Now I have a.
Join
Now I
the
have a.
cohort.
Oh,
Reject.
yeah. Now I forgot the other thing, which was this. Location business. Location is that cohort
Alright.
and the student. So I think Jason got added.
Yeah.
Yeah, there he is. Cool.
There he is.
So let's add Mark. He was at 456 Main Street, just down from Jason.
Wow, neighbors.
He's 21, and he's Mark at suncoast.io.
Hey.
Hey, and we should see, as we add students, that student count goes. Tony, 999 Main Street. And we should see that 4 students go to 5 students. Cool.
Did we make that 5-student thing a clickable
No.
thing? Oh, that was just to show.
Yeah, that was just to show how many students are down here. Maybe now it makes sense to move that little badge. Where is that badge? That badge is on the cohort.
Can we make it next to students?
Yeah. Let's take this badge out of where the cohort thing is, and let's add it to where we render the students. Where do we render the students? Right up here. And let's add it in right here. And then we need to move the margins, all this stuff that it requires for the badge. All of this is required for the badge stuff. This is kind of the nice thing and the terrible thing about Bootstrap is you have to know all the classes to put everywhere. As long as you know all the classes to put everywhere, all this stuff is amazing. And you just get used to it after a while. It's with all things, it gives and it takes away. cool. So that is creating, adding students. Yeah, new student. Create a student. And we also have to in here. Re-add the code for nested resources students. We lost this when we regenerated the scaffold to get JBuilder.
Why did you have to regenerate the?
Because I wanted JBuilder for this, and I didn't have it when I created the scaffold the first time. So.
Is it like the student ID in cohorts? Is that kind of something? Because how do you mean you didn't create it before? I thought you could just. It's automatically created when you run.
I ran the scaffold, but I generated the scaffold before I enabled JBuilder, so it didn't give me a JBuilder enabled scaffold.
Okay.
Then I had to go to the gem file and say, no, I want JBuilder, and then I had to regenerate my scaffold. So I think most of your capstones are going to be enough that you're going to want JBuilder. So that may be one of the first things you do is turn on the JBuilder. So I think you're all going to want it. Then the scaffolds you create will be perfect from the start, and you won't have to regenerate stuff like I did. Okay, it is almost noon. Let's take a look at our list. What do we have? Show student details, update a student, and delete a student. So probably what we would do next is turn these into links where we could click on a student and see the student's detail. Yeah, and Jason and Mark and Tony's.
So that would be email address. All
Yeah,
that stuff.
age.
Just a quick question about generating scaffolds. So you uncommon JBuilder, but also you want to make sure that all your scaffolds are created before DB migrate?
No, so you can do them one at a time. So you can create your, like I created the cohorts and I did DB migrate, and then I did the students later and I did DB migrate. You can, if you have your full ERD done, you can generate all your scaffolds and then do one big DB migrate. That's totally fine, right? Probably what you want to do when you get to the point of creating your scaffolds is come see me, and I will sit with you as you create them, and we'll just make sure they look good, so we don't have to do this thing that I did, which was create them and recreate them. Yeah. It's not a big deal because you can see we can recover from it. Garrett was saying that he created for, was it your Universe Explorer or Safari?
Yeah.
You forgot a column,
Explorer.
or you created a column of the wrong type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're all going to do that at some point.
Yeah.
It's easy to recover from because we just create another migration to fix that table or fix that column. So even if you don't get your scaffold right the first time, it's easy to recover from. And at some point, at least one or more of you is going to create one or more scaffolds that need to go back and be adjusted. And I will just work with you, or we'll do a lecture on, hey, Anastasia's capstone, she forgot a column or she misnamed a column and it's time to go fix that. And I'll show everybody how to fix it.
When do we bundle comment on comment?
Anytime you change, the very first time your Rails application, it bundles for you. Anytime you change the gem file, you need to bundle.
So if you uncommented something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or you've added something.
You added something.
Yeah, because what we're going to do next when we talk about image uploading and maps and user authentication, we're going to be adding new libraries to Rails. So we've been adding libraries to React, right? Like Router and Axios and our little form tool. We haven't really added any libraries to Rails yet, and there are plenty. So there's image uploading helpers. There are ones for maps. User authentication all have libraries. Every time we go in and we add a library to Rails, we run bundle. And you'll see that as we go through adding libraries to Rails, we have to run that bundle command. And I think it even reminds you that you have to do it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you should run bundle.
Yeah.
Cool. Right? We got pretty far. Let's break for lunch. And then when we come back at 3, let's see if we can wrap up showing students, updating students, and deleting students. But you can imagine it's not going to be very different than what we've already done for showing a cohort, deleting a cohort, and updating a cohort. Yeah? So this is when I said, like, once you get your ERD and your scaffolds going, and you take that first thing and go through the process of static HTML, the static HTML from state, hard-coded state, and you replace that with API, the rest will flow, because then you'll have an example in your own app for doing it, right? Your very first one, you're probably gonna come back to this project and like mimic what we were doing here. After you get the first one done in your project, you'll just be repeating that process for the other things, right? Once you can create a troop, you'll repeat the process for creating an event. Yoga class, yoga pose, right? Once we create a pattern, right? Counts and steps. Videos, then images, then code, you'll just be kind of repeating that. Same thing with your mapping stuff. Right? Once you get the first one done, right, the others will flow from there. And I was saying to Anastasia on the break, right? The first one you go do, it might take you a couple days to get that working. The other ones will take less and less time as you repeat it. You'll be going faster and faster as you go.
And we're all obviously repeating this for this homework for tonight,
Mhm.
whatever kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
first one.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you'll be doing it very similar to this for the homework, right? And it doesn't have to be, right, the user interface is fancy and whatnot, right? Don't worry about, you can use Bootstrap if you want, or you can CSS it yourself if you want, or you don't have to.
Like minimal CSS.
Yeah, minimal CSS is okay. That's the kind of thing, like a lot of these are the kinds of things where post demo day, if you're looking for things to do, go back to some of these projects and add CSS, make them look prettier,
It's
right?
fun anyway.
Right, that gets you like still in the practice of writing CSS. It gives you GitHub points, right? It shows that you're continuing to work. Those are the kinds of things you can do that I don't mind if students do after graduation day, right? Because there's plenty. Go back and do adventure mode on some homeworks you didn't do adventure mode. Now you feel a little more confident, you've had a little more experience, you've done React a couple times, go back and do adventure mode on some of the React ones.
Yeah.
Go back and do adventure mode on some of the initial HTML and CSS ones you didn't do.
To keep that kind of grind that we were doing here
Yeah.
too, because we wake up, do some stuff for a few hours, and
Yeah, yeah, and you don't have to like go hard 14 hours a day, but you should be in the habit post-graduation of doing some code stuff for a couple hours, at least a couple hours every day, just to keep it fresh, right? It's like a muscle. As soon as you stop exercising it,
Well,
it
that's
goes
what
away.
happened. I
True.
minored in American Sign Language, and I was doing it all the time for 2 years, and then
Yeah.
I stopped, and I just like I don't remember anything
Yeah.
from ASL now.
I spent
Yeah, he was
a
it.
I spent a summer with a friend in college who was an interpreter. Was an interpreter then and is still an interpreter now.
Yeah,
And we just spent the entire summer just speaking with
just
sign.
signing. Yeah,
Cool.
And I got to the point where I had like, I don't know, like a first, second grade vocabulary
Yeah.
in sign. I stopped using, and it was gone.
I
I stopped
know.
using it, and it was just gone.
I could probably finger spell my way
Yes.
through the conversation,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
no, I can't
Yeah.
remember everything.
Let's see. My name.
Yep.
My name is.
The J is like this, or,
Yeah.
or no,
A
not J.
B C D
G.
E F.
G-R.
Yeah. See, I used to know this.
C,
D E
F,
F. Oh yeah.
F,
F.
G, I think
G,
is this.
yeah.
Yeah. G.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my name is so long, Anastasia. I have to like ANASTA.
Yeah.
It's a long
And most people just come up with like,
They give you like a
yeah,
sign.
like you know, they'll do a thing with a,
Yeah.
right, it's some, let's say you're usually like a
Mine
letter.
was this A because I always wore lipstick.
Yes.
A, and this is lipstick.
Yeah. Cool.
That was my
Hey,
Right.
lipstick.
Hey, lipstick.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll break. When we come back at 3, we'll do show, update, and delete a student, and I think that's most of our, if not all of our Universe Explorer.